In a world where insanity reigns supreme and safety pin manufacturers are running out of metal for the diapers of the leftists, it's comforting to know an ancient, fat, long-haired, bearded reprobate has your mind in mind. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California, and despite every attempt by the SHR Media Network to revoke his shameless contract, we return to the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon.
You're listening to Late Night Radio on the SHR Media Network. Caution, there will be mature themes explored and potentially adult language used. If conservatarian words, phrases, certain concepts, or rhetoric offends you, tune out now.
Guess what day it is? Guess what day it is? Huh? Anybody? Julie, hey, guess what day it is? Oh, come on, I know you can hear me. Mike. What day is it, Mike?
Tomo, you magnificent bastard, I read your book.
I drink your milkshake.
How dare you?
I call that bold talk for a one-eyed fat man.
Fill your hand, you son of a bitch!
Captain.
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 No, not yet. Don't pass out on me yet. Of course you realize this means war. Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same. And if you and I don't do this, then you and I may well spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to BZ's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show, where I am broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California, spell it with a K, a mere 2 miles east of the locus of evil, on the entire left coast of the Bill Mill, the belly of the beast, the Capitol building in downtown Sacramento at 10th and L Streets, where late at night you can hear the death of common sense and its concomitant wail as it wafts from that petrifying edifice. And late at night, when I exit the plush, resplendent, sumptuous, palatial, and effulgently bulbous SHR Media Studios, I'll be smelling the odoriferous stench of sulfur, brimstone, and evil emanating from that mentally destitute column structure aforementioned. Rat Salad is going to be your bartender again tonight. He pours with the best of them, and the lava lamp is in fact lighted to my right, your left, indicating that you can listen and chat at shrmedia.com. You can watch the show on the SHR Media YouTube channel or the Facebook page. I'm going to tell you this. We don't water our drinks just like we don't water our conversation. Politics, religion, crime, culture, economics, race, sex, science, law. We talk about it all here at the Saloon. Nothing is sacred. The speech is free. But the booze is not. All that we ask is that you flush the toilet, jiggle the handle, and don't forget to tip your waitress. Nothing has happened. No speeches were given tonight. I almost want to tell that story now. Maybe I will. Kind of Bigfoot, the stuff I've got for later on. I think I will do that. Okay, President Trump. Just those 2 words are enough to set off all the fireworks possible in the brains of leftists, Democrats, and the American media maggots from sea to shining sea. there was a speech tonight, the State of the Union speech. And this was wonderful. My wife, of all people, see, I actually have to drive here to the studio. It takes me about a half hour. I couldn't find a station that was playing the State of the Union so I could continue, and when I had left, it was still playing. I get here, start to set up everything in the studio. The wife calls. And then I said, okay, call back on the other line, the phone line, to find out if it's going to work for tonight. And I think it is. I think the phone line, and if you want to call in, after I speak to Carmel Malamed, the number is 575-208-4481. And if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, you'll see that number pop up at the bottom of the screen. And when the number comes up, then you know it's time to call. In any event, she called, and I made sure that the phone appears to work, the call-in number works. And then she said, by the way, were you aware that at the end of the speech, Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House, ripped the speech up in half? And I said, no. And then I thought, okay, come on, she's making that stuff up. Nobody's going to do that. Nobody would be stupid enough, petty enough, shallow enough, or peckish enough to do that, except that it turns out it's true. I was going to leave this for the second hour, but I got to do this now because I had to jump on the internet quick like a bunny through my favorite search engine. And there it is, FromTheHill.com. The headline by Brett Samuels, just about a half hour ago or less. Pelosi rips up Trump's speech at conclusion of State of the Union. Speaker Nancy Pelosi, on Tuesday, ripped up her copy of President Trump's prepared statements and remarks at the conclusion of his State of the Union address. As Trump finished speaking and most lawmakers stood to applaud, Pelosi took the printed copy of Trump's speech and tore it in half. She placed the shredded copy in a stack on the dais as Trump made his way to greet members of Congress. The moment capped a tense address from Trump that started when the president appeared to snub Pelosi's offer of a handshake. So, I don't know. I haven't played this yet. This is a sound bite from C-SPAN. I'll be able to see it, but I don't know if she says anything, so I'm going to take a chance and play this. I don't know if we'll be able to hear anything in particular from this. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. I'll find out in just a moment. Okay, that's the wrong one. Okay. They don't want to talk to me anyway tonight. But I find that very amusing. So my conclusion was, I guess, no Christmas card from Nancy Pelosi to Donald Trump this year, or vice versa. Interesting. Tonight, I have got a great guest. The gentleman's name is Carmel Malamed, and he was turned on to me by two people, Lonnie Poindexter and also Dave Milner. And Dave Milner is in chat right now. Perhaps that's the appropriate time to thank all the people that are in chat right now, Mike, Dave, and one viewer who is masked, and I will not unmask one viewer right now. Dave in chat says, Fred the Seeing Eye Chameleon does not approve of Nancy Pelosi's behavior. And, Mike is in chat. Well, welcome to... Oh, Alaskan just popped into chat. Okay. So anyway, I corresponded with Carmel Malamed. He is an Iranian Jew. And we originally were going to speak for maybe about a half hour or so. As it turns out, he went for a full hour. And then, as I customarily do, I thought, okay, well, this is going so swimmingly, perhaps I can extend the time. And I did. I got about an hour and a half out of Carmel Malamed. This is a pre-recorded interview because what Carmel insisted to me is he works during the day. He speaks to any number of people in groups during the day, but when he's done, he likes to go home and be with a wife and kids, and he doesn't want to have to stay up till 8 o'clock to talk to me. Cool, I just pre-record everything. So this is a pre-recorded interview, so we can't take phone calls, but at the end, if you want to call, we can do that. But he had great information. So this is Carmel Malamed, almost about an hour and a half on this. Great interview, great guy. And the cool thing is that he said, you want to do it again? I'll do it again. And I think that's a wonderful thing. Love the heck out of that.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Tonight, folks, it's my honor to feature a gentleman by the name of Carmel Malamed, who is a Middle East expert. Tonight, we're going to concentrate primarily on the various issues involving Iran and the Middle East, the U.S., and Israel. So, Carmel, welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you so much.
Folks, I want to tell you a little bit about Carmel Malamed. He's an award-winning, internationally published journalist and activist, a speaker, and an attorney based in Los Angeles. Born in Iran, Malamed fled that country at a young age after the Iranian Revolution with his family to escape persecution from Iran's newly established Islamic regime. As a journalist since 2000, he's given a new voice to the emerging and successful Iranian-American community living in the United States, as well as having covered issues relating to Iran and the Middle East. His articles have appeared in the Jerusalem Post, JTA International Wire News Service, Times of Israel, Arutz Shiva News, and Orange County Register, as well as a whole host of other prominent online publications. He's fluent in Persian and familiar with Iranian culture and history. Malamed has successfully interviewed various influential leaders and newsmakers in the U.S. and the Middle East. In 2004, he landed an exclusive interview with Empress of Iran, Farah Pahlavi, and likewise has appeared on various English and Farsi language radio and television news programs to discuss Iran and Iranian Americans, including Fox News Radio, Radio Iran 670 AM, Lion Chasers with Lonnie Poindexter, my good friend, by the way, and Voice of America Farsi Television. As an Iranian-American journalist, Malamed is frequently invited to speak at various venues across the U.S. and Canada about the human rights violations perpetrated by Iran's regime against members of trade union members, religious minorities, women, children, artists, and journalists living in Iran. Malamed is also he possesses a unique expertise as to issues concerning Iranian jurisprudence related to non-Muslims, Iranian human rights abuses, Iran-Israel relations prior to 1979, as well as the Iranian regime's mistreatment of Christians and other religious minorities. Over the years, Malamed has received numerous journalism awards, namely from the Society of Professional Journalists and the Hearst Foundation for his excellence in news reporting. I got to tell you, sir, that's quite a CV for you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
So, Carmel Malamed, I'd like to welcome you to the Saloon tonight and thank you so kindly for appearing here tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Now, when we corresponded via email, you wrote this to me, and it really got my attention. You wrote, I'm a freelance reporter and cover all things Iran and Middle East for a whole host of online and offline publications. So there is no one central place that you can find my work. I'm asked all the time, though, what sets me apart from the other experts on Iran, and experts in, air quotes. And that's this. I am of Iranian heritage. Unlike a lot of the other experts, I speak the Farsi language fluently, and I know the culture, and I know the history of Iran. I'm in regular contact with individuals on the ground in Iran who are protesting. I've been exclusively covering Iran and Iranian American stories for the last 20 years, so I speak from real experience. I've translated the Iranian regime's laws pertaining to non-Muslims and also monitored their anti-Semitism for 20 years. I'm an old-school, nonpartisan, non-biased reporter who just gives the objective facts and allows the audience to make their own decisions. So tonight, Carmel Malamed, there is so much information to discuss, so many things that I want to talk to you, so many events. I almost don't know where to begin, but I have to tell you this. You have my greatest thanks tonight, Carmel Malamed. They involve your ability to get to the core of various Iranian and Middle Eastern issues. I've been wanting to get things sorted out by a professional for a long time, which is truly why I value your appearance here tonight. I greatly appreciate it. So let's start, if we can, with what I would consider the first primary questions for you, Carmel Malamed. Why aren't you a supporter of the current government in Iran? You are a Persian, after all.
This regime is a criminal terrorist regime that came to power 40 years ago. There was never any kind of democratic process where the people of Iran ever elected them. They basically overthrew the previous regime of the Shah through a bloody revolution, started executing all their opponents in Iran during the 1979 revolution. There were, socialists, there were, democratic forces, there were loyalists to the Shah. This regime came to power illegally and executed and took out all their opponents. And once they got into power, they started implementing radical Shiite Islamic Sharia law on the Iranian society. So Muslims, Jews, Christians, Baha'is, Zoroastrians, everyone in the Iranian country was basically forced to follow this dogma, this religious dogma, which became state law. And the vast majority of folks that have fled Iran over the last 40 years and those that are in Iran today oppose this regime because of their radical theology that they've been imposing and lack of freedoms, lack of democracy. The Iranian people are a great, noble, peace-loving people. Historically, if you look at them, they are the descendants of Cyrus the Great. If you look at the Bible, Isaiah talks about how Cyrus freed the Jews, allowed them to return back to Jerusalem to rebuild their holy temple after 70 years of captivity under the Babylonians. So the Persians, the Iranians that you see today, are the proud descendants of Cyrus. They have love for all of humanity. And this regime is totally opposed to that heritage and to that mindset. So they oppose this regime. I oppose this regime. The vast number of Iranians in Iran and outside of Iran oppose this regime because they are criminal. Their activities have been criminal. They've been sponsoring terrorism. And it's been a totalitarian government or regime that's been forcing the people into horrific, situations.
Your family, however, was affected, was it not?
It was. My father's relative, at the age of 30, was arrested on false charges of spying for the U.S. and Israel. He was not involved with the Shah's regime. He was not involved with any activities that were political. He and his family were just wealthy Jews who owned a hotel in the heart of Tehran. And unfortunately, the regime wanted that hotel, and they put him in front of a firing squad, and they executed him in July of 1980. My father risked his own life to get this gentleman's body, the relative of ours, to give him a burial, a decent burial, He was going to be buried with the other regime opponents that had been executed in a mass grave. And when my father and another gentleman went to get their relative's body from the morgue, the regime said, no, we're not allowing you to take this man's body. He is an infidel. You must pay for the bullet that we used to end his life. 50,000 Iranian currency, cash. Otherwise, we won't give you the body. My father and this other gentleman, don't ask me how, but somehow they were able to go to relatives, neighbors, friends, and collect the money. They retrieved this gentleman's body, gave him a decent burial, and then a few weeks later, myself, my parents fled Iran, right at the cusp of Iran-Iraq war. And my parents left everything behind. Did not come out with any of our money, any of our property, any of our assets. We came out with only the shirts on our back and eventually immigrated to the United States. And one of the reasons why I have such immense love for this country that we live in, because where else could immigrants that are fleeing radical Islamic terrorism and theology escape, be able to recreate a new life and a new family and have success? Nowhere else in the world but America. So, yes, my family was directly affected by this regime, like thousands of other, hundreds of thousands of other Iranians.
Your story, your family's story, that of your father and grandfather, so it's personal with you. You saw it up close. Your family was directly affected. And when you told me that story just now, it reminded me of another individual that I spoke to at Freedom Fest in Las Vegas in 2017. And she ran for Congress in, I believe, Colorado. She didn't win. She ran as a libertarian, but her name is Lily Tang Williams. She left China. She grew up under Mao Zedong, under the authoritarian and tyrannical regime then of China, and came to the United States. She's probably one of the most incredible pro-America individuals that I've ever had the pleasure to meet. But she was under terrible circumstances, just like you, very similar to you, except in another country. So I'm assuming I would be correct in saying that for her it was a massive motivation, and for you it's a similar motivation here in the United States.
That's correct. Just as a side note, I was only 1 year old, so I have no memory of what occurred to our family member. This has all been relayed to me over the past 40 years as a child, a young adult, and an adult myself. It's something that my father, who experienced it firsthand, still has nightmares about, even though it occurred 40 years ago. And it's taken him quite a long time to come to grips with this disaster that happened to our family. But we were just one of the hundreds of thousands of Iranian families whose family members were just executed for no reason. They were taken out by this radical Islamic regime just because they opposed the regime, or they didn't follow the regime's dogma or political philosophies, or the regime just wanted them eliminated so they could take over their assets and properties.
Folks, I'm talking tonight to Carmel Malamed. He's an Iranian journalist and an attorney, has written numerous articles. We have the pleasure of speaking to him tonight. Carmel, can you kind of give us, my guess would be that you still have a sense of what's happening back in Iran. Can you give us an overview of what's actually happening in Iran right now? In other words, what's the temperature on the streets of Tehran, for example, with its citizens?
You have to take into consideration, before I get into the specifics of what's going on right now, think your audience needs to take into consideration the fact that 70 to 80% of Iran's population today are under the age of 40. These folks are millennials. They do not remember the Iran revolution that the Ayatollah took over.
Okay.
They have no memory of the Iran-Iraq war. They are basically a new generation of Iranians. And like most millennials in America and Europe and elsewhere in the world, they're going on the internet and they're going on social media. And they're seeing their fellow counterparts and young folks all over the world with great educational opportunities, great job opportunities, food, medicine, freedom. And they're saying to themselves, why not us? Why shouldn't we have all that? Why is our country, which is so wealthy in oil, gas, minerals, and other natural resources, struggling? And as a result, they have taken to the streets. This is not a new phenomenon. We are seeing what we are seeing, and we've been seeing since November, is not a new phenomenon. This has been going on for quite a bit of time. I would take it back to perhaps 10 years ago, 2009. A lot of Iranians flooded the streets after the former president, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, was reelected. And they were furious because they knew that the election was a fraud. It was sham. And they took to the streets. They protested for a lack of freedom, lack of economic opportunities, and they were mowed down by the regime. They were executed on the streets. They were arrested. They were beaten. They were imprisoned. And since then, there's been this groundswell, a bubbling of anger and resentment with the regime. And last November, their gaskets were blown. They were furious at the regime's corruption, sudden increases in gasoline prices, ridiculously high food prices, lack of jobs, lack of economic opportunities. You have to take into consideration that vast majority of Iranians are very educated folks.
Yes.
Men and women.
Yes.
Men and women. And they have no job opportunities. And they took to the streets. They said, we don't have any freedom. We don't have any good economic opportunities. We're hungry. This regime needs to go. And, that's the situation that we have right now.
What kind of effect, Carmel Malamed, are the economic sanctions from the United States and elsewhere having on Iranians? Is that really a throttling that's going on? And I'm guessing that is really affecting people in Iran.
Yes, it is. It is absolutely indirectly affecting them. A big misnomer that you hear in the mainstream media, and I would say left-wing media and apologists for the Iranian regime, is attacking the sanctions because it's hurting people, quote-unquote, hurting people. But they're not giving you the full story, Mark. They're not telling you that a good chunk of the Iranian economy is controlled by the Ayatollahs and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. They control private and public businesses. So obviously it's going to affect the society. Obviously it's going to affect regular people and regular jobs when the majority of the economy is being controlled by the Ayatollahs and their thugs. So absolutely the sanctions are, indirectly and I would say directly affecting the people of Iran. But they have no anger at the Trump administration or America for those sanctions. They have anger at the regime for throwing away all the country's wealth into these crazy terrorist organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, funding these crazy hegemonic wars in Iraq and Yemen and Syria, Lebanon, and also putting the country's wealth into their own pockets.
That's the first half hour of the interview that I had with Carmel Melamed. He's an Iranian Jew. We're going to go to a break so that if you need to make water, etc., or maybe burn your pizza, you can go ahead and do that. We'll be right back in about 5 minutes and continue with this great interview with Iranian Jew, internationally acclaimed journalist, and still in contact with people in Iran right now, this very second. That's Carmel Melamed. We'll be right back. I'm BZ. This is the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show. Come on back.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
From a public locker inside a dilapidated Long Island rail station comes a show designed to piss off liberals using truth, facts, and ridicule. The Lid Radio Show, featuring the conservative voice from the People's Republic of New York, the Lid himself, Jeff Dunitz. Tune in every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific on the SHR Media Network. Go to shrmedia.com. At Lid Radio, we fight for the truth, justice, and a good kosher T-bone. If you don't listen, Hillary Clinton might sneak into your bedroom in her housecoat late at night and blame you for her election loss. It's the Lid Radio Show with Jeff Dunitz.
For 50 years, I've seen the American people blinded by corrupt politicians, a lapdog media, and deceptive Islam. The one thing the elites fear is one man with a cane. I'm Dave Milner. Join me through Spreaker, iTunes, and SoundCloud, through SHR Media and the Western Free Radio Network, for half a century of experienced perspective on political and social issues, weekly on The Unpleasant Blind Guy. And catch me on Jeff Mitchell's EDL Radio on blogtalkradio.com. There's
no surrender, ever.
Because truth is not always pleasant.
This is Shannon Wright of The Right Way with Shannon and Mike in the AM. Mike's not here, so I gotta talk fast. You gotta join us. Fall season. Getting ready to start up with a whole bunch of new stuff. News and food and politics and sports and entertainment and a whole bunch of stuff. But wait, Mike's coming. I gotta go. Remember, Shannon and Mike in the AM on SHR Media, Monday through Thursday, 7 to 9 a.m. Make sure you tune in.
Featuring right thinking from a left brain and doing the job the American maggots won't. BZ is fundamentally changing America, one diaper at a time. Just when safety pin manufacturers are running out of metal for the diapers of the leftists, where the speech is free, but the drinks are not. The Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon can be heard every Tuesday and Thursday night, commencing at 11 p.m. Eastern and 8 p.m. Pacific, where pushback is a requisite art form in and of itself. Let your ossicles be truly liberated when you listen to the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon, only on SHR Media Network. No ferrets were harmed in the making of this ad.
Join me, Jack Alexander, for the Jack Alexander Experiment podcast, as I take a unique outsider's look at the issues affecting the USA. I fearlessly take on the issues that everyone else is too scared to touch. The Jack Alexander Experiment podcast is available wherever good podcasts can be found, like Spreaker, iHeartRadio, and Google Podcast. The Jack Alexander Experiment, because it's not a matter of left versus right, it's a matter of right versus wrong.
It's your business diva here, Melanie Collette. I am inviting you to a front row seat as I discuss some of the most intriguing details of wealth and finance with today's movers and shakers in the world of business. Listen in and discover financial truths on a global, domestic, and household scale. Uncover topics that will impact your wallet today and in the future. Money Talk with Melanie airs Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. East, 2 p.m. West, right here on SHR Media and High Plains Pundit Talk Radio. You can't afford to miss it.
Featuring the effervescent contrarian Sackheads Clint, plus the unrestrained bulbosity of BZ, the Sackheads Against Tyranny is a real chat show. Doubling your late-night conservative talk show pleasure with double the hosts, you can listen every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern. Please note, some contents may have settled during shipping. Member FDIC, batteries not included, warranty voided Montenegro.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
And we are back. Tonight, on replay, I'm talking to Carmel Melamed. And Carmel is a great internationally published journalist. He's an Iranian Jew. And he's talking to me about the events that have occurred in Iran, what is the current temper of the times in terms of Iran itself, and he's going to get to Soleimani. Because what you're going to understand and hear very shortly is that, I hope you're sitting down when I tell you this, would it shock you to think that everything the American media maggots were telling you about Soleimani and Iran was wrong?
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Yeah. So let's continue with that. And Carmel, let's take it away. Let's see if I can find the right spot here.
Executed on the streets. They were arrested. They were beaten. They were imprisoned. And since then, there's been this groundswell, a bubbling of anger and resentment with the regime. And last November, their gaskets were blown. They were furious at the regime's corruption, sudden increases in gasoline prices, ridiculously high food prices, lack of jobs, lack of economic opportunities. You have to take into consideration that vast majority of Iranians are very educated folks.
Yes.
Men and women.
Yes.
Men and women. And they have no job opportunities. And they took to the streets. They said, we don't have any freedom. We don't have any good economic opportunities. We're hungry. This regime needs to go. And, that's the situation that we have right now.
What kind of effect, Carmel Melamed, are the economic sanctions from the United States and elsewhere having on Iranians? Is that really a throttling that's going on? And I'm guessing that is really affecting people in Iran.
Yes, it is. It is absolutely indirectly affecting them. A big misnomer that you hear in the mainstream media, and I would say left-wing media and apologists for the Iranian regime, is attacking the sanctions because it's hurting people, quote-unquote, hurting people. But they're not giving you the full story, Mark. They're not telling you that a good chunk of the Iranian economy is controlled by the Ayatollahs and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. They control private and public businesses. So obviously it's going to affect the society. Obviously it's going to affect regular people and regular jobs when the majority of the economy is being controlled by the Ayatollahs and their thugs. So absolutely the sanctions are, indirectly and I would say directly affecting the people of Iran. But they have no anger at the Trump administration or America for those sanctions. They have anger at the regime for throwing away all the country's wealth into these crazy terrorist organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, funding these crazy hegemonic wars in Iraq and Yemen and Syria, Lebanon, and also putting the country's wealth into their own pockets. the Ayatollahs, the IRGC, they are making their own children and grandchildren and their own families wealthy, while the people of Iran are suffering. So, yes, they are hurting from the sanctions, but it's not the full story as our media, our mainstream media, may be putting it out there. The big culprit, and they know it, the big culprit is the regime and the regime's thugs that are resulting in their economic hardship.
That's a very interesting point, and that's why I'm really glad that I had you on tonight, Carmel Malamed. You're pointing out these things that, yes, the sanctions are having an effect, but the disdain that the citizens of Iran have is more with their government than it is with anything else. That's a point you just don't hear in our media these days. So I asked you about the point of view in terms of the citizens of Iran. You gave a real great answer about that. But my next question is, okay, so conversely, what's going on in the government of the Islamic Republic of Iran? Is there a sense of calm? Is there anything resembling panic or any kind of an emergency in the government? Are there massive stresses on them, or did they seem to be just the government's just taking it all in stride?
No, they are absolutely under pressure. They may not project that stress and that pressure in our media or in their media. Let's not forget, they're a totalitarian dictatorship a la North Korea or Cuba. They control their media, and they do not want to project weakness to their own society or to the outside world. But they are most definitely under pressure, and they're feeling the pressure, and you see it from the rhetoric of the regime's thugs and leaders. The Ayatollah Khamenei, their supreme leader, and I put that in quotes, quote-unquote, supreme leader, has given a number of speeches denouncing the sanctions, talking about how it's hurting their military, it's hurting their society, and also you can see it through their actions. The supreme leader and the whole apparatus has gone to the Revolutionary Guard and their thugs and said, go out on the streets, shoot the protesters, arrest the protesters, beat them, stop them. We can't have this revolution happening to us. So their actions also reflect the stress that they're feeling. And at the same time, you're seeing them, quite a number of the intelligentsia that were loyal to the regime, cracking and saying, hey, we need to do something to help the people. You've had a number of media folks that appear, reporters and anchors that appear regularly on the state-run media, coming on social media, resigning, apologizing to the people and saying, we're sorry for lying to you. For 11 years or X amount of years, we've been feeding you the propaganda of the regime, and we apologize. You have people that were in the entertainment industry in Iran coming forward and denouncing the regime's activities. So they are definitely feeling the pressure, and they may not say it directly, but they are showing it through their activities.
Folks, we're talking to Carmel Malamed. He's an Iranian, Farsi-speaking, Middle Eastern expert, Iranian expert, moved here to the United States, a journalist and an attorney, and I'm very blessed to have you here tonight, sir. Let me see if I'm understanding you correctly. The people of Iran at this point are not pointing their fingers at Western nations or President Trump in terms of the conditions in Iran right now. They're mostly focusing on Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran. Is that essentially what you're saying?
Absolutely. And you don't have to take my word for it, Mark. You can go to social media, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and see the videos of Iranians protesting in the streets and chanting, "Death to the dictator. Our menace, our enemy is here in Iran, not in America." And also during the Soleimani funeral, that sham funeral that the regime put on, the people of Iran took to social media and thanked President Trump. They were tweeting and putting up pictures on Instagram of cakes and pastries with little notes in Farsi that said, "Thank you, President Trump, for taking out this criminal Soleimani. Thank you for standing up behind us." When President Trump recently tweeted in Farsi language that he was behind the people of Iran, that tweet was the most popular tweet that Twitter has ever had for Farsi language because of all the Iranians in Iran replying to him and retweeting to him their appreciation and their thanks. So they're thrilled with the president, and they're telling us very plainly in their chanting that their enemy is the regime and not the current administration and not the president and not the American people.
And see, Carmel, that's exactly why I wanted to speak to you tonight, because you're presenting a diametrically opposed view that you just don't hear from anybody. It's a 180-degree view from what is portrayed by what I call the American media maggots, the media themselves, and likewise the media in Iran as well. So it would seem to be there's a huge chasm, a massive disparity between the people of Iran and the Muslim government of Iran. So I think what I'm building to is this. Clearly the government in Iran is vastly different than the people on the streets themselves. So because of what's happening recently, and we'll get into some of those actions, the killing of the Iranian general, etc. Clearly there's, and you've said, there's a lot of pressure on the Iranian government right now. But I think my question would be, is there such pressure on them, and because of that pressure, is that regime, are they getting close to doing something, I guess for lack of a better word, stupid? Does it feel, or is the sense that they're being pushed into a corner? And just in terms of humanity, people being pushed into a corner do not react well. So I think my question is, do we have more to be afraid of or worried about because of some future reaction from the government of Iran? Do they have a sense of, okay, we can't be silly, stupid, and fattening. We have to control ourselves. Or is the pressure on them such that we don't really know what they're going to do?
To be perfectly honest with you, I myself, as a reporter who follows the regime, and no one else knows, it's a big question mark. You've got to take into consideration the fact that this regime is not just one faction. It's not just one, leader like Muammar Gaddafi or Saddam Hussein. The Iranian regime is a theocracy that has the Ayatollahs. It has the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. It's got various paramilitary groups. You have different factions in this regime. So it's really hard to say how they would react and in what ways. There are many who want to relieve some of the pressure so the regime still stays in power, and believe that if they keep antagonizing America, it's going to backfire on them. If they keep antagonizing the society and repressing them, it's going to backfire on them. But at the same time, you have factions in the regime that are evil, for a lack of a better word. And they will eliminate or try to eliminate whoever their enemy is. At the same time, there are factions that say we can't show weakness to America, our neighbors, because then that'll create, it'll embolden the Iranian people to rise up against the regime. So it's a big question mark right now. And I don't think I could be able to give you a right answer of what their response would be. And at the same time, I would caution your listeners and anyone who's following what's going on in Iran to be cautious of anyone that says they know how this regime will react, because there are too many factions, there are too many question marks right now.
Okay, too many factors, too many variables. You make an excellent point. And I'm going to ask you the questions that when we corresponded by email, when you suggested these questions for you tonight, I thought, this is brilliant. This is perfect. These are two great questions that are timely. So I have to ask you, first is, what do you think Carmel Malamed, President Trump, has been doing wrong with regard to Iran?
I don't think there's anything he's been necessarily doing wrong. I think there are things that he could do a little bit better.
Okay.
I would, if I were advising him, which I am not, humbly, as a reporter, as an Iranian who opposes the regime, I think he's been doing a fantastic job as far as putting the economic pressure, putting the diplomatic pressure. What I would recommend that the president do better would be to go to the Europeans, go to the rest of the world that does trade with Iran, and not only say, hey, you guys are going to suffer the economic consequences of working with Iran through sanctions, but making the case through a moral and democracy argument to Europe and to Asia and the Russians and the rest of the world, and saying, look, this regime is a totalitarian, evil entity. You guys have to get together. We all have to get together as a coalition and say no more. Holocaust denial is ridiculous. There is no place for this anywhere in the world. Why isn't Europe standing up? The hypocrites in Europe that just came out for the 75th anniversary of Auschwitz being liberated, why don't any of those leaders come out and sever their economic and diplomatic relations with Iran? The president and the administration need to press things like that with the Europeans, with the rest of the world, with the Pope. I would compare Ronald Reagan's and Margaret Thatcher and Pope John Paul II's approach to dealing with the Soviet Union and the evil empire. They went out there and made that moral argument and rallied the whole world behind the fact that the Soviet Union was an evil empire. It was an evil entity that needed to cease to exist. And it wasn't just through economic pressure, it was through diplomatic pressure and making that moral argument. And I think the president should do that, the administration should do that. They've done a good job so far, but they need to do more of that and talk about some of these groups that are being affected by the regime. Christians, Jews, gays and lesbians, trade unions, make the case to the larger world about why they need to put this regime in a corner, and hopefully that will bring pressure on the regime to cease their activities or collapse.
In your answer that you just gave, you led me to another question, and I'm going to go to that before my second question about Trump. You mentioned that there's been essentially no reaction by Europe with regard to Iran. So my first question when you said that, when you mentioned Europe, is, okay, Could the reason be, Carmel Malamed, because Europe is afraid of Iran? Why do you think that there is little if any reaction from Europe to Iran? Is it fear? Is it some kind of leverage? What do you think with regard to that?
It is, in my humble opinion, 100% greed. Nothing but money and business. They have a lot of business and trade and investment with Iran. And unfortunately, those economic interests have blinded them, shamefully. I think aside from that 30-something-year-old chancellor of Austria, majority of Europe, European leaders and European Union have shamefully been appeasing this Iranian regime and wanting that quote-unquote Iran deal, that shameful deal, for money reasons, because Iran does a tremendous amount of business with them, buys their products. They buy Iranian oil and natural gas. They buy Iranian raw materials. So Europe has no fear. They have a lot of money interests, and shamefully, shame on them for not standing up and speaking out against this regime. You had the German Chancellor Angela Merkel go out, I believe it was last month. She went to Auschwitz, and she was making very, solemn commitments to fighting anti-Semitism. And I looked at that and I said, stop crying crocodile tears, Merkel. If you're serious about fighting anti-Semitism and fighting Holocaust denial, stand up to the Ayatollahs and say, no more. Why is it illegal for Germany, anyone in Germany, to deny the Holocaust, but it's not illegal for the German government to work with the Iranian regime, which has been denying the Holocaust for 2 decades? Shame on Germany. Shame on Europe.
That is an exquisitely salient point. Folks, we're talking to Carmel Malamed, who is an expert on Middle East policies, on Iran, an Iranian himself, who speaks Farsi, a journalist and an attorney, and I'm really glad to have him here tonight. That leads up to my second question. Carmel, what do you think President Trump has been doing right or properly with Iran?
Well, the number one thing has been supporting the people. He's gone on social media. He's gone on television. He's gone out there during the press conferences and said, we are with the people of Iran. We are supporting them. He's called on the Iranian regime not to kill or imprison or beat the people. He's properly put economic pressure on the regime and the regime's thugs and the Revolutionary Guard. He's correctly shown restraint in some instances and not provoked them, not given them an opportunity to go out there and say, hey, America's the aggressor. Those are some of the great things that the president and the administration have done, and not just the president, Secretary Pompeo, Brian Hook, the U.S. point person in the State Department for Iran. They have correctly been pressuring this regime economically, publicly, and on the flip side, stood with the people and said, we are with you. We hear your voices, and we are supporting you.
In the Middle East, Iran is certainly a critical country involved there. Carmel Malamed, what I call the American media maggots, leftists and Democrats, they all took President Trump to task when Iranian Major General Qasem Soleimani was killed. As he was waiting, he was going to attend some kind of a meeting at the Baghdad airport with, I think, Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis. Isn't he that guy? Wasn't he the Iraqi-Iranian military commander who headed the PMF, the Popular Mobilization Forces? And with that, we'll stop for just a moment. I'll be back after this. I hope if you've been listening to this, you understand the perspective that Carmel Melamed has. He is an Iranian Jew, which is why he's brought up all the various aspects that he has now. He's essentially said that what the media are telling you and have told you about Iran is completely erroneous. And then when we come back, you want to hear the truth about General Soleimani? Oh, you are definitely going to hear the truth about Soleimani when we come right back after this.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
From a public locker inside a dilapidated Long Island rail station comes a show designed to piss off liberals using truth, facts, and ridicule. The Lid Radio Show, featuring the conservative voice from the People's Republic of New York, the Lid himself, Jeff Dunitz. Tune in every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific on the SHR Media Network. Go to shrmedia.com. At Lid Radio, we fight for the truth, justice, and a good kosher T-bone. If you don't listen, Hillary Clinton might sneak into your bedroom in her housecoat late at night and blame you for her election loss. It's the Lid Radio Show with Jeff Dunitz.
For 50 years, I've seen the American people blinded by corrupt politicians, a lapdog media, and deceptive Islam. The one thing the elites fear is one man with a cane. I'm Dave Milner. Join me through Spreaker, iTunes, and SoundCloud, through SHR Media and the Western Free Radio Network, for half a century of experienced perspective on political and social issues, weekly on The Unpleasant Blind Guy. And catch me on Jeff Mitchell's EDL Radio on blogtalkradio.com. There's
no surrender, ever.
Because truth is not always pleasant.
This is Shannon Wright of The Right Way with Shannon and Mike in the AM. Mike's not here, so I gotta talk fast. You gotta join us. Fall season. Getting ready to start up with a whole bunch of new stuff. News and food and politics and sports and entertainment and a whole bunch of stuff. But wait, Mike's coming. I gotta go. Remember, Shannon and Mike in the AM on SHR Media, Monday through Thursday, 7 to 9 a.m. Make sure you tune in.
Featuring right thinking from a left brain and doing the job the American maggots won't. BZ is fundamentally changing America, one diaper at a time. Just when safety pin manufacturers are running out of metal for the diapers of the leftists, where the speech is free, but the drinks are not. The Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon can be heard every Tuesday and Thursday night, commencing at 11 p.m. Eastern and 8 p.m. Pacific, where pushback is a requisite art form in and of itself. Let your ossicles be truly liberated when you listen to the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon, only on SHR Media Network. No ferrets were harmed in the making of this ad.
Join me, Jack Alexander, for the Jack Alexander Experiment podcast, as I take a unique outsider's look at the issues affecting the USA. I fearlessly take on the issues that everyone else is too scared to touch. The Jack Alexander Experiment podcast is available wherever good podcasts can be found, like Spreaker, iHeartRadio, and Google Podcast. The Jack Alexander Experiment, because it's not a matter of left versus right, it's a matter of right versus wrong.
It's your business diva here, Melanie Collette. I am inviting you to a front row seat as I discuss some of the most intriguing details of wealth and finance with today's movers and shakers in the world of business. Listen in and discover financial truths on a global, domestic, and household scale. Uncover topics that will impact your wallet today and in the future. Money Talk with Melanie airs Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. East, 2 p.m. West, right here on SHR Media and High Plains Pundit Talk Radio. You can't afford to miss it.
Featuring the effervescent contrarian Sackheads Clint plus the unrestrained bulbosity of BZ, the Sackheads Against Tyranny is a real chat show. Doubling your late-night conservative talk show pleasure with double the hosts, you can listen every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern. Please note, some contents may have settled during shipping. Member FDIC, batteries not included, warranty voided Montenegro.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Folks, we're back. We are in the second hour of BZ's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show. This is an interview with Carmel Malamed that I pre-recorded last week because he's generally not available at night. He likes to be with his family and his kids. Great. I think that's a great move. So we pre-recorded the show, and he is an absolute great interview. He's also he's saying stuff and will continue to say stuff that just makes you think, how do the American media maggots get away with lying to the public as nakedly as they do? Well, we're going to pick it up with that, and we're also going to go now into General Soleimani, and you're going to discover that essentially everything the American media maggots told you about General Soleimani is wrong.
Not just the president, Secretary Pompeo, Brian Hook, the U.S. point person in the State Department for Iran. They have correctly been pressuring this regime economically, publicly, and on the flip side, stood with the people and said, we are with you. We hear your voices, and we are supporting you.
In the Middle East, Iran is certainly a critical country involved there. Carmel Malamed, what I call the American media maggots, leftists and Democrats, they all took President Trump to task when Iranian Major General Qasem Soleimani was killed. As he was waiting, he was going to attend some kind of a meeting at the Baghdad airport with, I think, Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis. Isn't he that guy? Wasn't he the Iraqi-Iranian military commander who headed the PMF, the Popular Mobilization Forces? Am I getting that wrong? Anyway, he killed them with a drone strike on January 3rd. Another thing that I'm curious about, and I don't know if you have heard this, individuals were telling me that Soleimani flew into Baghdad airport, not on a military plane, but on a commercial jet. If true, that seems remarkably cowardly to me.
I don't recall the specific details of how Soleimani got to Iraq. I really could not comment on the specifics. What I could say is our media was wrong. They were 100% wrong because Soleimani was a horrendous killer, not just of Americans and American soldiers, but of Muslims. Muslim Arabs, Muslim Iranians. This man had the blood of hundreds of thousands of people. If you go to Syria, if you go to Iraq, and you talk to those people, they're Sunni Arabs, they're Shiite Arabs, and you say Soleimani, no one, the majority of them, will not have any love for him because Soleimani has been able to perpetuate this horrific civil war in Syria that's killed, I believe it's 800,000, maybe more. That continued bloodshed of what's going on in Syria had been perpetrated and continued by the efforts of Soleimani. He went in there with the Iranian Revolutionary Guard and with all these Shiite militias that were funded by Iran and continued that bloody civil war that's been killing thousands of civilians. He has been instrumental in destabilizing Lebanon and taking out tons of Lebanese that were Muslim and Christian that opposed the Iranian proxy Hezbollah. Soleimani was critical as the head of the Quds Force, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, in killing 1,500 Iranian Muslim protesters back in November. This man was a killer. He was a murderer. And for anyone to say that it was wrong for the president to take him out, they're mistaken. And unfortunately, this media, unfortunately, the mainstream media that we have in America, automatically goes into a mode of opposing anything that this president does. We need to be lifting up our heads to the sky and saying, thank you. Thank you for having a president that has taken out this murderer. Let's put aside our partisan views about this president and just look at it from a moral basis and say, hey, this guy was a killer. He's no longer on this planet killing. It's a good thing. And you have no arguments from the Arab world. No one has come out and said, oh, why did you kill Soleimani? I haven't heard anyone in the Arab media. Maybe the Iranian factions that are, the Arab factions that are loyal to Iran and get money from the regime were crying over Soleimani being taken out, but the majority of the Arab world weren't. So all around, our media was wrong, and the president was well within his rights legally to do it, and morally as well.
You mentioned the media. I'm going to get to that in just a moment. One of the first things that I thought was obviously missing with regard to any kind of a take by the media in America was, why was no one asking, and if they did, I missed it, why was no one asking in the media, what was a major general of Iran doing in Iraq? No one asked that question. Well, of course, the heads of the leftists and the Democrats and what I call the American media maggots, they exploded in anticipation of the Armageddon that they were sure Iran was going to unleash on American interests in the Middle East and the U.S. itself. So what happened is Iran lobbed some missiles at an American base. There were no casualties. So, Carmel Malamed, why do you think there was no resulting Armageddon, as the American media maggots almost seemed to desire? And why was there no Armageddon, as Iran has promised so many times against the United States, when I guess you could say that, the opportunity was there, the time was ripe for the Iranian government to do it? It seemed to me like a really measured strike at a base and was far from Armageddon.
I think the mainstream media in the U.S. and Europe just does not understand this regime, has not been following this regime, has shamefully been under-reporting on the regime, and spinning whatever ideology or message that they want. If you look at the regime, and if anyone has been following this regime, they know that they're teetering right now. They're teetering economically. They're teetering socially. That 80 million people that live in Iran, the vast majority are not happy with this regime. And for the regime to go out and, in a quote-unquote Armageddon type of strike would, jeopardize their power base. It would infuriate the people even more. They may face tremendous military strikes from the U.S. and U.S. allies. So they're pretty scared. and they know that, if they make the wrong move, either internally they will go down, or externally they may go down by a strike from the U.S. Unfortunately, our media isn't aware of what's going on, or even if they are, they're apathetic and they're not following the regime and reporting on the regime properly. I like to compare this regime to a loud barking dog. It's got a loud bark, it barks a lot, but when you hit it with a newspaper, the proverbial newspaper, on the head, it quiets down. It knows that it can't go beyond a certain bounce. And if they do, they get the message, which they did with this strike on Soleimani.
Folks, we're talking to Carmel Malamed tonight. Carmel, let me back up a moment and throw another question out for you. I submit that perhaps one of the greatest pitfalls of the Western world is the failure to understand the complexities of dealing with the version of Islam as practiced in the Middle East. So historically, you're kind of dealing with nomadic Bedouins, folks who didn't really recognize borders per se. They're very cognizant of tribes, and there are many, many historic intricacies that are interwoven into all kinds of people all throughout the Middle East that I think the Western world really doesn't have the ability to understand. Am I far away in thinking that?
I can't talk about the rest of the Middle East. That's the Arab world. You are absolutely correct. They are different tribes and groups and have different thinkings and mentalities. I can only speak to Iran, which is my expertise. There are different tribal groups in Iran. There are different ethnic groups in Iran. But they are pretty much united with this national perspective, with a common language and a common culture. And no, we don't educate ourselves as Americans and Westerners about the complexities of that society in Iran and the larger Middle East.
The other thing that I think a lot of media leave out is, to me, the obvious, because you have to factor in and I think understand the difference between Sunni and Shia. You know, people, Sunni and Shia, let me see if my summary gets even close, that I have a fundamental understanding. Sunni, it is all about Sunni and Shia. Sunni Islam, ISIS, hates Iranians, Shia. Sunni Arabs were responsible for 9/11, essentially. Iran is mostly Shia. If I'm not mistaken, the largest number of Shiites in the world. Saudi Arabia is mostly Sunni, where Shiites are a minority. Syria is mostly Sunni. ISIS, ISIL, Daesh are Sunni and Wahhabist. And Iran is, the government of Iran is predominantly helping and funding Syria. Iran equals Shia and ISIS equals Sunni. So, let's see, if I'm... Shia, which is Iran, numerically are a much smaller group than Sunni. Do I kind of have that right?
Yeah, that is correct. I would just add that there's a large segment of Iraq where you have Shiites. There is a segment of Shiites that live in southern Lebanon. And you have a segment of Shiites that are in Yemen. The current Houthi terrorists in Yemen are Shiite, and they are getting support from Iran because of their Shiite
allegiance
following, religious following.
Right.
The difference between the two sects of Shia and Sunni are basically the Sunni follow a certain prophets that preceded Muhammad, and the Shiites follow a certain other group of prophets that followed Muhammad. And they have, there was a chasm between them several thousand years ago over who was the successor to Muhammad. And that has perpetuated into, ongoing war and conflict between these two different sects of Islam.
Basically, massive doctrinal differences. I think, what is it, about 85% of the world's, 1.5 billion Muslims are mostly Sunni. But so seldom do I ever hear mentioned in the media this particular issue, which is huge and directly involved in what's going on in the Middle East. So one of my thoughts was, okay, media, if you can't even understand the two major sects of what's going on, then how can you begin to even remotely understand the true nature of what's being played out then? It boggles my mind to think that people are writing, and another reason that I'm so glad that you're here tonight, people writing things essentially from ignorance, or do I have that wrong, Carmel Malamed?
They are ignorant, they are lazy, they don't want to do their homework. They're young reporters that have just been thrown into a beat. They don't take the time to learn about these societies and cultures and religions. Some of it is just apathy. They don't care. I come from the old school world of journalism that believes in doing your homework. As a reporter, you have an obligation to do your homework, to give the facts, to get the background history, know what you're talking about before you put pen to paper or start typing out a story or reporting a story in front of the cameras or radio. So unfortunately, you are absolutely right. We have a media, mainstream media, that is apathetic, uneducated, lazy, or just, they are listening to what their editors are saying, and they're not thinking for themselves.
Carmel Malamed, you wrote an article on January 29th for the Arutz Shiva, and the title of it, I'm holding the article right here, it says, L.A., Los Angeles, Iranian Americans welcome dialogue with Trump administration official. You wrote this article. Trump administration's Brian Hook addresses Jewish, Christian, and Muslim Iranians in Los Angeles following the elimination of Qasem Soleimani. Can you tell us about this article and why that meeting is important, do you think?
Well, you just look at the community. Before I get into the visit by Brian Hook to Los Angeles, I need to mention the fact that at one of the events, I was a moderator for a question and answer segment with Brian Hook at one of these events for the Iranian American community. I just want to put that out there and lay it all out so people understand that there's no bias on my end. And I've put that out in the article itself. But it was significant, Mark, because of the fact that for 40 years, every administration, from the Carter administration up until the Obama administration, has never really come out and spoken to Iranian Americans. The largest segment live in Southern California. You've got close to 1 million Iranians living in California itself. About approximately 300,000 living in Los Angeles. They are the largest expat Iranian community outside of Iran. Why haven't any of the other administrations ever come to talk to the community? Hear their side of the story. Get their feedback. Share with them what they're doing. This was historic. No one, and there might have been, but I did not see anyone in the and the mainstream media reporting on this historic aspect of the State Department and the administration going out and meeting all these Iranian Americans that know firsthand what this regime is capable of and what this regime has done. Not just to Muslims, not just to Jews and Christians, but to Zoroastrians, Baha'is. Baha'is in Iran are executed. They have zero rights. Christians and Sunnis and Jews, Zoroastrians have third-class citizenship or second-class citizenship. But Baha'is have zero rights and zero citizenship. They're just executed. They're killed. The regime has no tolerance for them. And they were able to meet with Brian Hook. They were able to talk to him. And you had religious leaders and community leaders. They were able to share their thoughts. And the outpouring of just support for them, for the administration coming out and meeting them was tremendous. Is the entire Iranian American community supportive of the Trump administration? Not at all. In no means. There are many Iranian Americans that don't like this president. They don't like his approach to Iran. They don't necessarily support the regime. They're not crying over Soleimani, but they're Democrats, or for whatever reason, they don't like this administration. But they do appreciate the fact that the administration came out to their community, listened to them, heard them, listened to their questions, answered their questions, and said, hey, you guys matter. In this whole Iran policy that we as Americans are putting out there, you guys matter. And that was historic. And one of the main reasons why I wrote that article, to put it out there, you don't hear from them. You don't hear from the Iranian Christians who have been under tremendous persecution by this regime. And I don't mean just Armenian Christians or people that were Christian in Iran. I'm talking about converts. There are hundreds of thousands of former Muslims that converted to Christianity in Iran over the last 40 years, and they have underground churches, and they are being killed. They are being arrested. They are being tortured. We don't hear from them. The mainstream media doesn't hear from them. And I was very honored and grateful to them for speaking to me and allowing me to share their story in this article and share their experiences with venues like yourself and other media outlets that are not in the mainstream.
See, that's another reason that I'm glad you're on tonight. The other thing is that you hit upon this at the beginning of the interview, and that's these people are going to oppose whatever it is that President Trump does simply because of the fact that it's him. And I believe that to be true completely. As you point out so properly, this stuff isn't covered. The media doesn't seem to care. And I think it's purposeful simply because, for no other reason, that it is President Donald John Trump, and that's a story for another day that I could discuss for hours on end. Folks, we're talking to Carmel Malamed, who is an Iranian journalist, attorney, an expert on Middle East affairs and Iran. One sort of final overarching question, and that's with regard to Iran and the nuclear deal. On January 16th of 2016, that happened to be the same day that 4 American detainees, including one guy from the Washington Post, a journalist named Jason Rezaian, I believe. On the same day that was released, there was a jumbo jet carrying $400 million in euros and Swiss francs and a whole bunch of other currencies, and it landed in Tehran. Iran said that money was allegedly a partial payout for an outstanding claim for U.S. military equipment that was never delivered. And then, oddly enough, $1.3 billion in cash followed into Iran. Pallets, literally pallets of cash delivered in the dead of night by a U.S. C-17, and it's something right out of a Robert Ludlum or a Tom Clancy novel. And with that, folks, we're going to be right back. It's 9:30 on the left coast. It's 12:30 on the right coast. It's tomorrow on the right coast. It's Wednesday on the right coast. We've been speaking to Carmel Malamed. Great interview, great guy. We'll continue with that right after this. I am BZ, the Bloviating Zeppelin. You're listening to the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show. And don't tune out. There's a little bit more left of Carmel. Then we'll get into some of the issues of the day. Please come back.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
For 50 years, I've seen the American people blinded by corrupt politicians, a lapdog media, and deceptive Islam. The one thing the elites fear is one man with a cane. I'm Dave Milner. Join me through Spreaker, iTunes, and SoundCloud, through SHR Media and the Western Free Radio Network, for half a century of experienced perspective on political and social issues, weekly on The Unpleasant Blind Guy. And catch me on Jeff Mitchell's EDL Radio on blogtalkradio.com. There's
no surrender, ever.
Because truth is not always pleasant.
It's your business diva here, Melanie Collette. I am inviting you to a front row seat as I discuss some of the most intriguing details of wealth and finance with today's movers and shakers in the world of business. Listen in and discover financial truths on a global, domestic, and household scale. Uncover topics that will impact your wallet today and in the future. Money Talk with Melanie airs Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. East, 2 p.m. West, right here on SHR Media and High Plains Pundit Talk Radio. You can't afford to miss it.
From a public locker inside a dilapidated Long Island rail station comes a show designed to piss off liberals using truth, facts, and ridicule. The Lid Radio Show, featuring the conservative voice from the People's Republic of New York, the Lid himself, Jeff Dunitz. Tune in every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific on the SHR Media Network. Go to shrmedia.com. At Lid Radio, we fight for the truth, justice, and a good kosher T-bone. If you don't listen, Hillary Clinton might sneak into your bedroom in her housecoat late at night and blame you for her election loss. It's the Lid Radio Show with Jeff Dunitz.
Hey girls, Carry Girl Gear is here. More and more women every day are concealed carrying, participating in competitive shooting, and getting firearms training. It's not a boys' club anymore, and we don't have to shop in their stores anymore either. Finally, a cool and unique clothing line just for women. Dope tees and hats for the patriotic concealed carry and 2A girl. So what are you waiting for? Go check out carrygirlgear.com today.
Broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California, a mere 2 miles from the state capital, the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show can be heard every Tuesday and Thursday night at 8 p.m. Pacific and 11 p.m. Eastern. Only on the SHR Media Network. Go to shrmedia.com to listen. You can also watch on the SHR Media Facebook page and the SHR Media YouTube channel. No goldfish were abused in the making of this ad.
Show on the SHR Media Network, Sackheads Against Tyranny. On shrmedia.com, go there quick like a bunny, 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific, every Wednesday, live and direct on the SHR Media Network, shrmedia.com. Be there.
Hey, this is Michael Wright.
And I'm Shannon Wright.
Join us for The Right Way with Shannon and Mike, Monday through Thursday from 7 to 9 a.m. right here on SHR Media.
Why are they joining us?
For fun things like sports, politics.
Oh, maybe some news and entertainment?
And all kinds of other things.
Money and recipes and events, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, so join us Monday through Thursday, 7 to 9 a.m. here on shrmedia.com.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
And we're back. Hour and a half, boom, gone like that. Welcome back to the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show. I haven't mentioned this all night, but I should probably mention it now. You can follow me on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter at BZEP, at BZEP. You can like me, and you can follow me on my Facebook page, Bloviating Zeppelin. And you can friend, follow, and like the SHR Media Facebook page, and you can also subscribe to the SHR Media YouTube channel. And on the YouTube channel, if I'm not mistaken, I think there are only 2 guests right now, 2 hosts that go to YouTube. It's myself and Dave Milner. I may be wrong. Southern Sense. Annie Ubellis is always also on YouTube as well. So go there to the YouTube channel, the SHR Media YouTube channel, click notifications, give our videos a big old thumbs up, just like that. Great hosts, great videos, great shows, and, got to throw this in, do you happen to be a supporter of the Second Amendment? Because if so, you might want to go to Facebook and join the USGOA, the United States Gun Owners Association. On Facebook, they're a great bunch of folks that you need to listen to. Go there, quick like a bunny, join the group. Great folks, great time. The interview tonight is with Carmel Malamed. And Carmel was kind enough to come on my show. He spoke about Iran. He will continue to speak about Iran. And also about Soleimani. I got to have him back. Tomorrow, things are going to change again. Oh, my God. I'll talk about that at the conclusion of the interview. This is the last segment of Carmel Malamed. He is an Iranian Jew. His father, his parents, moved him out of Iran when the Shah fell. And now he's talking to us about Iran and essentially is telling us that everything the American media maggots have been telling you about what's been happening in Iran and about Soleimani, that's all bogus. A fundamental question. Carmel Malamed, why did Obama, do you think, do the so-called nuclear deal with Iran when Iran has, in my estimation, pretty much a notorious history of not caring anything about holding up their end of any bargain or deal conducted with a Western nation? I never understood that. Is there a reason for that, do you think?
My mind is as boggled as yours is, Mark. I still do not understand why anyone would give billions of dollars in free cash to a regime that is trying to acquire nuclear weapons. For 40 years has been saying death to America, we want to destroy America, has been holding Iranian Americans and other Americans hostage. It boggles my mind. I still don't understand it. And it was most definitely a ransom. You have folks on the left, unfortunately, these talking heads, these Iranian regime apologists saying, oh, no, this had to do with a previous debt that the United States owed Iran from the Shah's era. That's bogus. That's garbage. And the reason it is just go online. Just recently, last week, there was a video that was put out by the regime of one of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard leaders who was speaking in front of a big crowd in Iran. And he was saying, you guys are all idiots. You don't understand anything about the economy. Look at what America did. We held Rezayan, that Washington Post reporter, and America paid a ransom of $1.8 billion in cash. We need to do the same thing. We need to keep getting Americans and holding them hostage so we can get money in ransom, and it'll help our economy. That's the way to fix the Iranian economy. You had this Iranian Revolutionary Guard general or leader go out into their media and plainly say that it was a ransom from the horse's mouth itself. And it's
yet,
available online. If you go to the website, that nonprofit organization called MEMRI, MEMRI.org, .org, they have that video there, and they've translated what this Revolutionary Guard leader says. He plainly says it was a ransom.
And yet no one wants to listen. No one wants to listen in Europe. No one wants to listen in the United States. Except President Trump, it would seem. Was President Trump, Carmel, do you think, pulling the United States out of the Iran deal, was that the proper thing to do?
It was the best thing to do. Because why was America, why would Europe want to continue giving a lifeline, an economic lifeline to this regime that wants the destruction of America and the Western world and democracy money? And why would we want to give them a path to a nuclear weapon, nuclear weapons? Eventually, that shameful deal would lapse. Their ability to develop nuclear weapons and reprocess that uranium would lapse after, I don't remember the exact date, 7 or 10 years.
Right.
Well, after 7 or 10 years, the deal would lapse, and they could, generate as much nuclear material as they like. Why would we give anyone a path to that? So the president was 100% right in tearing up that deal because it was giving an economic lifeline to the regime, and it was potentially giving them a path to nuclear weapons, which could plunge the entire Middle East, which is already a tinderbox, into a potential nuclear war in the future.
The Europeans, as you indicated, it would seem to me, are afraid of Iran because they're afraid that Iran will turn off the spigot to oil and gas and cash. So, Carmel, do you believe Iran had any intentions whatsoever of honoring that nuclear deal at all?
Most definitely not. They've never kept any deal that they've, quote-unquote, deal that they've made. If you look at their history, this is a regime that talks from both sides of its mouth. It does whatever it wants, thumbs its nose at Europe, the UN, and the rest of the world. The only time that they back off is when they realize that there's going to be serious political or serious economic or military consequences for what they do. You have reason to believe that they were not even honoring it during the deal itself. I don't know if you recall, but I believe it was last year or the year before, you had the Israeli Mossad, their equivalent to the CIA, go into Iran and remove this treasure trove of information that the regime was holding on to about processing uranium and making potential weapons. So that find in itself by the Israelis show that the regime was never genuinely interested in keeping that agreement.
Carmel, do you believe, or are you aware of any indicators that would tend to lead you to believe that Iran does in fact possess nuclear weapons right now?
I don't know that per se. I do not want to speculate on something like that. They are very secretive in what they've been doing as far as their nuclear program. It would be hard for me to say something like that, and I would prefer not to speculate on their nuclear weapons capability because I don't have that information. And the lack of information out there, it would not be prudent for me or anyone else to say whether they definitively have one or not.
Then this follow-up question, Carmel, do you think it's even possible in some fashion to stop Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons?
Absolutely. Most definitely. Through this continued economic pressure, diplomatic pressure, where the regime eventually collapses and you have a democratically elected government that comes into place and says, enough with this nuclear weapons program or any nuclear processing. We want to get rid of this stuff. So that would end it. As far as other avenues, there's most definitely cyber warfare. We've seen that with the Israelis. Several years ago, they had that computer virus Sputniks. I don't know if you recall.
Yes, I do.
Where they sent in that computer virus to screw up the Iranian regime's nuclear reactor and cause all kinds of sorts of problems.
Right. With the centrifuges.
Exactly. And also, don't forget the fact that much of the electrical grid that the Iranian regime has can potentially be a target for some kind of cyber attack from Israel, America, the West. So that could potentially, shut down their nuclear ambitions or weapons capabilities, desires to move forward and in that direction. So, and then of course there's the conventional, war, going out and taking out their facilities. The latter, that last option, I think, is something that perhaps we may not want to take because of the impact it may have on innocent civilian lives. But it's an option that's out there.
Well, especially in light of the fact that you were making the point that the Iranian public, the citizens, the bulk of them are against their government themselves. One sort of final question, Carmel Malamed, going forward, what do you think is the best policy for the United States to take regarding Iran?
Keep up the pressure. Keep up the economic pressure. Keep up the diplomatic pressure. Get Europe, get China, get the Pope, the Catholic world behind an effort to place the Iranian regime in the corner and embolden and empower the people of Iran through logistical efforts, giving them access to internet when the regime shuts down the internet, support the people in their actions in trying to overthrow the regime themselves, not with our involvement, but they themselves, empower them through any ways possible to do that. Continue in the same path and apply pressure, and eventually something will give. You cannot put any society, especially a society of 80 million, which is the population of Iran, under tremendous economic and totalitarian pressure and expect that society to survive and that regime to survive. Something's got to give eventually. And we're seeing cracks. We got to just keep the course and keep the pressure going on and isolate this regime as best as possible.
Carmel Malamed, I want to thank you ever so kindly for being here tonight. Can you tell people where you can be found on social media and where your stories and articles can be read, please?
I am available I can be found on Twitter at my first and last name, Carmel Malamed, KarmelMelamed, and then also available on Facebook as well under my name. My articles appear on a whole host of different news sites. I do have a blog on the Times of Israel news website under my name, so they can go to the Times of Israel website and type in my name or just do a Google search and my name will come up.
In the future, because I'm sure that Iran is going to be on the scope for quite some time, may I consult with you in the future and have you back on the show for any number of topics? Because if there's anybody that I've featured yet on the show who has professional quality insight with regard to specifically what's occurring in Iran these days, it is yourself. So I would very much like to talk to you again in the future. Would that be possible, sir?
It would be a pleasure and an honor. Thank you so much for having me.
Carmel Malamed, thank you again for talking to myself and the listeners tonight. Take care, sir, and I definitely hope that we meet again.
Thank you.
Great interview. That was Carmel Malamed, and I'm looking at a lot of websites. If you want to read his stuff, he is an author at the Jewish Journal. He also writes for something called the Jimena, Jimena Experience. He also writes for The Forward at forward.com. He also writes for the Times of Israel. This guy gets around. Great author, great writer. And apparently he's been on, he's been on Dave's show. God, I just can't believe, because we originally had agreed. I like this. This is a nice trend for me. I'll start out small. I try to be, I guess, the Scotty of radio. Under-promise and over-perform. And by under-promise, I mean, I'll start out small and I'll ask somebody, can you be on the show, 15 minutes, a half hour? That'd be fine. And then I get 15 minutes, a half hour. And then the next thing they know, they're talking about a half hour. And then when I look to the clock right up there, and I see it's just about the top of the hour for the top of the hour break, I'll say something similar to, this is going so well. Would you mind holding over for the break? And then, by God, we're off to the races. And invariably, all the people except for one, Joe Wamba, when he said a half hour, he meant it. And I intuited that from him, quite simply. But the information that you get from people, I mean, it's just fabulous. It's incredible. I love it. So there are so many other places that I could go right now that I'm wondering if I am going to go. There's a story that I do want to get to. I'm still agonizing over whether I'm going to do. Dave in chat says, BZ is trying to create a reputation as a miracle worker. If only, Dave. And again, thanks to everybody in chat for being here so studiously and so long. Alaskan, Simone, Jack, Mike, Dave, one viewer who I never once insisted they be unmasked. I think there's this one thing that I am going to play. I had a ton of stuff set up. I really did. I'm looking at his Twitter feed, Carmel, Karmel, Malamed, Melamed. Very simple. Just spell it like you'd say it. I got to play this. And I think I have time to do it before the end of the show. I had so much stuff set up here on the computer that I was going to go into. Yeah, she's going to blow, Captain. Here's a Saturday night skit that I discovered. This doesn't happen very often, but in 2 minutes, maybe 2 minutes and a half, it absolutely roasts leftists, and it's just kind of fun to listen to from Saturday Night Live.
To play ball, I like Purple Bird in the window.
I think he means the pigeon. He's never spoken this much before. Now, Max, what else do you like?
I like Park and Leash, and I like Trump. He's my man.
Now, this is a dog that some of the people on Saturday Night Live have attached a brain thingy to, and they're listening to the thoughts from this dog.
Wait, what?
What did your dog just say?
It must be a translation error, some kind of glitch.
There's no glitch. Donald Trump is our president. He carried the Electoral College fair and square.
This can't be right. Did you know your dog likes Trump?
He doesn't.
I absolutely do. Trump has issues, but one big change is better than business as usual.
Okay, Max, no, you drop that right now. You don't like Trump.
The Dow was up 2,700 points since he was elected. What's not to like?
Your dog is a monster.
No, he's not. Just let me talk to him, Max. I'm sorry, but you're just a dog. You don't know what you're talking about.
Excuse me, Helen, but yes, I do. Stinking helmet. Can't believe you put this on me. It's just that's that condescending attitude that made people want to vote for Trump in the first place.
Get over here, Max. This is crazy, okay? I can't believe you're saying this. You're supposed to be my best friend.
And as your friend, I don't want to see your tax dollars going to health care for illegals.
Your dog is a jack.
What? Oh, hang on, Max. Listen, Trump is bad. Trump is a racist.
What do you know about black people? You never brought one into our house once.
Really?
No, Max, that is not true.
It is absolutely true, Helen. Plus, Trump is the only one that isn't owned by Wall Street.
Oh my God, are you insane? My head's gonna explode. What about his record on women's rights? Don't you want me to have a choice over my own body?
You didn't afford me a choice when you cut off my balls.
Max, you don't know anything. You're a dog. You're just a dog.
You just assume that because I'm a Trump supporter that I'm a xenophobic racist.
No, I don't. But Max, your best friend at the dog park is a Chihuahua.
So?
Well, that means he's Mexican, and Trump wants to kick him out of the country.
If Paquito was born here, he has nothing to worry about.
Okay. I guess you could say that I'm easily entertained, okay?
Monsieur has been locked!
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, thanks for listening to the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon, live and direct right here on the SHR Media Network. If you want to contact me, you can find me on Twitter at bzep, at BZEP, and on my blog at bloviatingzeppelin.net. Promotional consideration is by the Lockheed Martin Skunk Works, Shure, and Electra Voice microphones, and Arrakis boards, plus Pratt & Whitney engines, thrust you can trust. Also, the Allahu Snack Bar, just a little bit of Mohammed in every bite. Tiaras are by My Little Pony. Thanks to my personal KC-135 Kettle One refueling team with whom I'll be consorting in less than an hour. Thanks to everybody in chat. Thanks for everybody listening live. Thanks to Carmel Malamed for being here tonight. And tomorrow night, chat show, not quite sure. Thursday night, I will be back with Dan Butcher, the second best man in the news business. God bless. Take care. Be safe. Tomorrow, Trump acquittal. What's going to happen?
Everybody quiet down now and get some sleep.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, Mama. Good night, Ben.
Good night, everyone. Good night, Mama. Good night, Daddy.
Good night, children. Good night, Daddy. Good night, Elizabeth.
Good night, John Boy. Good night, Jim Bob. Good night, Jim Bob.
Good night, Jim Bob.
What's going on? I was asleep. What's everybody doing?
Good night,
Jim Bob.
Good night, and good luck.
Now you know the rest of the story.
That's all, folks.